What if I told you the strongest army the world had ever seen didn't lose because it was defeated, but because it couldn't afford itself anymore? What if the fall of Rome wasn't caused by barbarian invasions, but by a slow, invisible collapse of trust? Trust in money, trust in leadership, and trust that tomorrow would look anything like yesterday. And here's the real question, one that still echoes through history. Could the same thing happen again? Before we go any further, I want you to think about this and tell me in the comments. Do empires fall because of enemies or because of debt? Rome once ruled the known world. Its roads connected continents. Its laws shaped civilizations. Its armies were disciplined, feared, and unmatched. For centuries, Roman power seemed permanent, eternal even. To the people living inside the empire, Rome did not feel fragile. It felt inevitable, like gravity, like the sun rising, like something that simply could not fail. But history does not care how powerful you once were. It only cares whether your systems still work. In the early days, Rome's success rested on a brutally efficient formula. War paid for the state. Conquest brought land. Land produced taxes. Taxes funded armies. Armies conquered more land. Each victory fed the next. Gold and silver flowed into Rome from defeated enemies. Slaves powered agriculture and construction. Loot funded public buildings, games, and welfare. The Roman economy expanded because the empire expanded. And at the center of it all was money. Roman currency was trusted because it was real. A silver denarius was silver. Not a promise, not a future claim. Actual metal. Soldiers trusted it. Merchants trusted it. Foreign traders accepted it across borders. Roman money didn't need advertising. It carried authority in its weight. As long as expansion continued, the system remained stable. As long as new wealth entered the empire, Rome could afford its ambitions. But empires, like all living systems, eventually meet their limits. By the 2nd century, Rome had reached the edge of what it could reasonably control. Borders hardened, enemies adapted. Wars no longer paid for themselves. Each new campaign cost more than it returned. The empire was no longer growing, but its responsibilities kept multiplying. And nothing cost Rome more than its army. What had once been a temporary fighting force became a massive permanent institution. Hundreds of thousands of professional soldiers stationed across distant frontiers. Salaries paid year-round. Veterans granted pensions and land. Forts built, maintained, and supplied. Roads repaired. Weapons forged. Horses fed. Entire regions existed solely to support the military machine. The Roman army was still powerful, but it was expensive beyond anything the ancient world had ever seen. Now here's where the trap closed. Rome's political system made raising taxes extremely dangerous. Emperors who pushed too hard often didn't live long enough to see the revenue arrive. Angry elites plotted. The public rioted. The army mutinied. Power in Rome was never secure, and everyone knew it. So emperors looked for another solution, a quieter solution, a solution that wouldn't spark rebellion overnight. They changed the money. At first, almost no one noticed. The coins looked the same size, same emperor's face, same value stamped into metal. But the silver content was slightly reduced, just enough to stretch the supply. A little more copper here, a little less silver there. More coins could now be minted from the same amount of precious metal. The army was paid. The bureaucracy functioned. Life went on. And that's the danger of currency manipulation. It works at first, but then it happened again. And again. And again. Over decades, Roman silver coins lost most of their real value. What had once been nearly pure silver became mostly base metal with a thin silver coating. The state insisted the coins were worth the same. Reality disagreed. People always notice eventually. Prices began to rise. Merchants demanded more coins for the same goods. Soldiers realized their pay bought less food. Savings lost purchasing power. Trust, the invisible glue holding the economy together, began to dissolve. Ask yourself this: what happens when money stops being a store of value, but wages, taxes, and debts are still demanded in it? The Roman economy began to fracture. Trade slowed. Long-distance commerce shrank. People hoarded real goods instead of currency. Barter returned. Taxes were increasingly collected not in coins but in grain, animals, and labor. Money, the tool that once unified the empire, was breaking it apart. By the 3rd century, inflation was no longer subtle. It was destructive. Some coins contained less than 5% silver. Prices spiraled upward. Confidence collapsed. Entire regions stopped trusting imperial currency altogether. And Rome faced another problem, one even more dangerous than inflation: debt. Rome had no central bank, no modern credit markets, no flexible borrowing system. When emperors ran out of money, they relied on forced loans, emergency confiscations, and crushing taxation. Wealthy Romans pulled their assets out of cities. They withdrew from public life. Investment vanished. Infrastructure decayed. Urban centers, once the heartbeat of Roman civilization, began to shrink. Then came the storm. Between 235 and 284 AD, the Roman Empire entered what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In less than 50 years, over 24 emperors rose and fell. Most were murdered by their own troops. Civil wars erupted across the empire. Trade routes collapsed. Plagues swept through populations already weakened by economic stress. The currency nearly collapsed entirely. And here's the most important shift of all. The Roman army stopped fighting for Rome. It began fighting for whoever could pay first. Loyalty moved from the state to cash. Emperors were no longer chosen by law or tradition, but by payroll. If a general promised higher wages, soldiers followed him. If he failed to deliver, he died. This wasn't a military problem, it was an economic one. As conditions worsened, Roman citizens increasingly avoided military service. The state filled its ranks with mercenaries and foreign troops. These soldiers were effective, but they weren't Roman in identity. They fought for payment, not loyalty. And when the money failed, so did their allegiance. To keep the system alive, the government imposed extreme controls. People were locked into professions. Farmers were tied to land. Sons inherited their fathers' jobs by law. Taxes crushed the middle class. Mobility vanished. Cities emptied. The economy survived, but barely. Rome still existed on paper, but its heart had stopped beating. So when invasions finally came, they didn't destroy a strong empire. They revealed a weak one. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was exhausted. Armies were underpaid. Supplies were unreliable. Command was fragmented. The state could no longer project power consistently. In 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was removed. There was no great final battle. No heroic last stand. No dramatic collapse. Just silence. Rome didn't fall. It faded out. And here's the uncomfortable truth history leaves us with. Rome didn't lose its army first. It lost its money. And once trust in money died, everything else followed. So I'll ask you one final time, and this time really think about it. Do empires fall because of enemies or because of debt? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to understand how money, history, and power really shape the world, subscribe me and let's make your 2026 the year you stop losing money.